When our man said his income had increased, I quietly felt relieved. I imagined our days becoming a little lighter, especially at the end of each month. It felt like something we had been waiting for, without saying it out loud. But somehow, the feeling didn't stay for long. The money coming in was more, yet it didn't seem to settle anywhere. I began to notice a quiet tension I couldn't quite explain. There wasn't anything obvious to point at. No large purchases or sudden changes that stood out. Still, something felt different in a way I couldn't ignore. At first, I told myself it might just be a heavy month. Maybe a few extra expenses that happened to come together. But the pattern didn't go away. One night, I sat down and looked more closely at our spending notes. The numbers were clear, but the meaning felt heavier than expected. That was when I realized it wasn't that we lacked money, it was that our life had quietly expanded with it. I moved through the morning slowly, preparing breakfast and Mira's lunch without thinking too much. The routine felt familiar, almost automatic, like it always had. There was comfort in doing the same things again. Our man sat with his coffee, looking more at ease than before. I noticed how his shoulders seemed lighter these days. Watching him like that made me feel quietly relieved. After they left, the house returned to its quiet rhythm. The washing machine hummed softly as I moved from one chore to another. Everything felt steady, almost too smooth. By midday, I opened a shopping app just to get a few essentials. I told myself it would be quick and simple, but I stayed longer than I expected. I added better snacks, something nicer than usual. Then a coffee I had been curious about for a while. Each choice felt small on its own. I reassured myself it was fine to enjoy a little more now. After all, things had improved for us. It felt like allowing something small I used to hold back. That evening, we ordered dinner instead of cooking. It felt like an easy choice after a long day. Somehow, it started happening more often. Things that once felt like treats slowly became normal. I didn't notice the shift as it was happening. It blended quietly into our daily life. The end of the month arrived sooner than I expected. I opened the banking app out of habit, without much thought. The number felt quieter than it should have been. I checked the numbers again, slower this time. The income had increased, just like we planned. But somehow, what remained felt exactly the same. I scrolled through the transaction list without rushing. Small expenses started to stand out more clearly. Things I didn't remember noticing before. A new subscription here, another meal ordered there. Small comforts that quietly slipped into routine. None of them felt unnecessary on their own. Each expense looked harmless by itself. Nothing felt excessive or out of place. But together, they began forming a different picture. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, letting the thoughts settle, trying to remember when this started. It didn't feel like a single moment. It wasn't that we became careless. Our idea of comfort had simply shifted, little by little, and we never really talked about it. That's what stayed with me the most. Small changes are harder to notice, but their weight shows up in the end. At the store, I reach for items I used to skip. The price tags don't slow me down anymore. It feels like a quiet reward for how far we've come. I don't compare brands or check discounts like before. My decisions feel quicker, almost automatic. Somewhere, I tell myself this is progress. Armand starts buying coffee outside more often. It's small, but it happens almost every day. I notice it, but I don't question it. Weekends become something we look forward to. We go out more, just to enjoy time together. It feels right, like something we've earned. I tell myself we deserve this ease. After everything, it feels fair to relax a little. But I don't look too closely at the numbers. The credit card bill rises, just a little. Nothing alarming at first glance, but it's higher than it used to be. I brush it off as part of a new normal. We're just adjusting to a better life. That's what I choose to believe. But as I go through the transactions, a pattern starts to form. Not one big expense, just many small ones. Comfort, I realize, quietly adds up. Myra handed me a school letter that afternoon. Looks simple, just another activity fee for next month. I held it a little longer than usual before putting it down. I opened the bank app, just to be sure. The number was there, but it didn't feel ready. I found myself calculating again, slowly. Mira asked if she could join the activity. I nodded and smiled without thinking too much. But inside, something tightened quietly. That night, Armand and I looked at the numbers together. We didn't say much at first. The silence felt familiar, but heavier. There wasn't any big mistake. Nothing clearly wrong stood out. Just many small choices, sitting quietly in the background. Armand said we should have more now. His voice wasn't blaming, just unsure. The question stayed longer than the answer. I kept wondering why it still felt tight, why every decision needed another thought, and why the sense of ease never arrived. That was when it became clear to me. It wasn't the income that changed things, it was the habits that quietly followed it. I started noticing a pattern I couldn't ignore. Each time our income increased, our comfort quietly followed. It didn't feel like a decision, just something that happened. It wasn't about showing off or losing control. We were simply adjusting to a life that felt easier. And in that ease, we stopped questioning small things. When life feels more open, limits begin to blur. I didn't notice where enough used to be. It slowly moved without me realizing. I gave it a name in my mind. The lifestyle expansion trap. When life quietly grows to match whatever we earn. The issue wasn't big spending. It was the small upgrades that kept repeating. Each one felt harmless on its own. Better coffee, easier meals, more convenient choices. These became part of our routine. I stopped noticing when they added up. Everything felt reasonable in the moment. It felt like something we deserved. But deserving something doesn't always mean we need it. That's when it became clear to me. More income doesn't always bring more security. Not when our habits grow just as fast. The next morning, I sat down with a notebook and started writing everything. Not just the big bills, but every small expense I usually ignored. It felt unfamiliar, but also strangely grounding. I divided the page into 3 simple parts: needs, comfort, and impulse. Seeing it laid out like that made things clearer than I expected. So most of our spending sat quietly in the comfort column. Not urgent, not necessary, just small choices adding up. I stared at that section longer than the others. That night, I talked to Armand without pointing fingers. I just wanted us to see the pattern together. The conversation felt lighter than I thought it would. We agreed on a few small limits. Delivery twice a week, nothing more. Subscriptions we didn't use were quietly let go. Grocery shopping returned to a simple list. I followed it more carefully this time. There was a quiet satisfaction in staying within it. We made one small rule for ourselves. If it wasn't necessary, we would wait 2 days. That pause changed how decisions felt. Strangely, those small changes made me feel calmer. Nothing dramatic had changed, but something inside felt steadier. Awareness, more than anything, brought that feeling. The next month felt quieter in a way I didn't expect. Nothing dramatic changed, but our spending felt more intentional. I could finally follow where our money was going. When I checked our balance, it looked different. Not significantly higher, but it didn't drop as quickly. That alone gave me a sense of steadiness. I found myself cooking more often again. Not because I had to, but because it felt right. The rhythm of it grounded me. Armand started bringing coffee from home. It used to feel like an extra effort. Now, it felt like a small decision that made sense. Mira joined her school activity without hesitation. I didn't feel that familiar tension anymore. It felt simple, the way it should be. The house felt calmer overall, not because we had more, but because things felt under control. That quiet shift changed everything. I realized comfort isn't the problem. It just needs a boundary. Without it, it quietly grows into something heavier. For the first time, the increase in income felt real. Not because it was bigger, but because we held on to it differently. That made all the difference. Sometimes I used to think the problem was never enough money, but slowly I began to notice how our way of living had quietly expanded. And that shift was harder to see than I expected. Earning more once felt like permission to loosen up a little. I didn't question small upgrades because they felt deserved. But now I see they quietly changed our baseline. Comfort slowly became part of our routine without much thought. Felt harmless because nothing seemed excessive. But over time, it quietly took up space we didn't notice. Money never disappeared all at once. It slipped away in quiet, ordinary moments. Small choices that never felt important on their own. I don't think the lesson was about earning more or less. It was about noticing where it all goes, quietly, and learning to stay aware even in the calm moments.